Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through the research so you don't have to, bringing you the crucial insights.
That's right. And today we're tackling something really quite unexpected.
Yeah, we're looking at how corporate misbehavior, specifically in accounting, might actually, well, spill out into our communities in surprising ways.
Exactly. We're digging into a study called The Local Spillover Effect of Corporate Accounting Misconduct. Evidence from City Crime Rates. It's by Holzman, Miller, and Williams.
Usually when you hear about corporate fraud, the focus is all on, investors, executives.
Right, the financial fallout for the company. But this research asks, does it go further? Could it actually affect everyday life, like crime rates, in the cities where these companies are based?
That's the core question, isn't it? Could a company cooking its books genuinely lead to more break-ins or car thefts in your neighborhood? It sounds like a stretch.
It does sound like a stretch initially, but let's look at what they found. The central finding is, well, pretty remarkable.
Okay, lay it on us.
The researchers found a clear link. When a company's accounting misconduct gets revealed publicly, there's a subsequent increase in financially motivated crimes in that setting.
Financially motivated. So what kind of crimes are we talking about?
Things like robberies, burglaries, thefts, and also motor vehicle thefts, the kind of crimes where people are trying to get money or property.
Wow. So the big takeaway is corporate fraud isn't just some abstract financial problem. It could actually make communities feel less safe.
That's what the data suggests.
How big an increase are we talking about? Is it a huge jump?
The study puts it at about a 2.3% increase in these specific crimes in the year after the misconduct is revealed. Okay, 2.3%. That might not sound enormous on its own, but...
But think about that across an entire city. It translates into a noticeable number of real incidents, real victims. It's not just statistical noise.
Right, it adds up. So the really interesting part is how. What's the connection? How does fraud in a corporate office translate to, say, more burglaries? That's the million-dollar question. The researchers turned to some established sociological theories to try and understand the why.
Like what?
Well, one key idea is Merton's strain theory. The basic idea, put simply, is that crime can arise when society sets up goals, like the American dream of financial success.
But doesn't provide everyone legitimate means to achieve those goals.
Right, exactly. So people feel a strain because they want the success but can't reach it through accepted ways, like jobs or education. That might push some towards, well, illegitimate means.
Okay, I can see how general economic hardship fits there. But how does corporate fraud specifically play into that stream?
Good question. The study connects it partly through Cressy's fraud triangle. The idea that for executives to commit fraud, you typically need pressure, opportunity, and some way to rationalize it.
Right, they need a reason, a chance, and a way to tell themselves it's okay.
Well, the researchers suggest that seeing this high-level fraud exposed can actually increase the sense of strain in the community. Especially, and this is important, if the scandal leads to layoffs.
Ah, okay, so if a big local company gets caught, and then people lose their jobs?
Precisely. That directly creates financial pressure. Other research actually backs this up. Fraud revelations can lead to significant job losses.
That connects to another theory they mentioned, right? Agnew's general strain theory.
Yes, exactly. Agnew broadened the idea, saying various kinds of negative life events or strains can trigger crime. Losing your job because executives were lining their own pockets. That's a major strain.
Okay, the job loss connection makes sense. But they also talked about rationalization, didn't they? How does seeing executives cheat make ordinary people more likely to commit theft? That feels like a bigger leap.
It does, but think about the social learning aspect. The researchers suggest that when people see powerful, respected figures like executives getting caught for major unethical acts for personal gain, it could, sort of, lower the mental barrier for others, especially if those others are already feeling financial pressure. It might make it easier for them to rationalize their own smaller-scale illegal acts, like everyone's doing it or the system's rigged anyway.
So it's a mix of direct economic fallout, like job losses, and maybe a more subtle shift in perceived norms, like a kind of cynicism setting in.
That seems to be the idea they're exploring, a normalization effect, potentially.
Okay, let's talk about how they measured this. How did they pinpoint these cases of corporate fraud?
They use official records from the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, specifically things called Accounting and Auditing Enforcement Releases, or AARs.
AARs, got it. What do those signify?
They're basically formal actions the SEC takes when they found pretty serious evidence of accounting violations. The study characterizes them as often involving Egregious acts committed for the executive's personal gain, so not just minor errors.
Right, these are the big intentional manipulations. And how many of these did they look at? What was the scope?
The sample covered 296 of these AARs, these fraud instances, spanning 156 different U.S. cities.
Okay, a decent number of cities.
Yeah, and the time frame was between 1996 and 2013.
Hmm.
Having that spread helps make the findings more generalizable, not just tied to one place or a specific short period.
And for the other side of the equation, the crime rates. Where did that data come from?
That came from the FBI's Unified Crime Reporting Program, the UCR data. It's the standard source for national crime statistics. They looked at city-level data year by year.
And specifically focused on those financially motivated crimes you mentioned earlier, robbery, burglary, theft, car theft.
Exactly. And they adjusted the numbers based on city population, so they're looking at crime rates, not just raw numbers.
Okay, this is crucial. Crime rates go up and down for lots of reasons. How did they isolate the effect of the fraud revelation? How do we know it wasn't just, say, a bad economy in general causing both the fraud and the crime?
Right. That's the core challenge in this kind of research. They use a lot of statistical controls to try and account for those other factors.
Such as?
Well, things you'd expect. City-level unemployment rates, income per capita, incarceration rates, demographics, how urban the city is. They basically tried to compare apples to apples by statistically adjusting for these differences.
Did they account for things specific to the city or the year?
Yes, they used what economists call fixed effects. City fixed effects control for stable characteristics of a city, like its underlying culture or geography. Year fixed effects control for nationwide trends, like a national recession affecting all cities in a particular year.
And they even controlled for past crime rates.
Yep, lagged crime rates. So they're looking at the change in crime after the fraud, accounting for the existing crime level.
And even after controlling for all that, the connection held.
That's the main point. The study reports that the positive association between the AAER revelation and the increase in financially motivated crime remains statistically significant, even with all these controls in place.
That makes the finding much stronger. It suggests it's not just some other trend happening at the same time.
It definitely strengthens their argument, yes.
Did they look at violent crime as well? Did that go up?
They did look at it, and interestingly, no. They found no significant link between the accounting fraud news and subsequent changes in violent crime rates.
So it really seems specific to crimes where the motive is likely financial gain.
Exactly. Which fits better with the theories about financial strain or rationalizing theft, rather than, say, crimes of passion or aggression.
That specificity actually adds credibility, in a way. It's not just a general things got worse effect.
I agree. It points towards a more targeted mechanism.
The study also mentioned doing robustness checks. What exactly does that mean? What else did they do to double-check their results?
Robustness checks are basically extra tests to kick the tires, to see if the finding holds up under different conditions or using different methods. Make sure it's not just a statistical fluke.
Okay, like what kind of tests?
One was a randomization test. They essentially shuffle the fraud events randomly across different cities and years, thousands of times, and reran the analysis
Why do that?
to see how likely it was that the connection they found in the real data could have just happened by chance. They found that only a very, very small percentage of those random shuffles produced a link as strong as the one they actually observed.
So it makes it highly improbable that their result was just random luck.
Precisely. It suggests the pattern they found is genuine.
What other checks did they run?
They also used a different statistical approach called difference in differences.
Difference in differences. Okay, break that down a bit.
Sure. They carefully matched each city that had a fraud revelation, the treatment city, with similar cities that didn't have one, the control cities. Similar in terms of size, past crime trends, things like that.
Okay, so comparing like with like.
Exactly. Then they looked at how the crime trends changed differently in the treatment cities compared to the control cities after the fraud happened.
And what did that show? Did it confirm the main finding?
It did. This analysis also found a positive association. They estimated roughly a 5% increase in financially motivated crime in the treatment cities over the 5 years following the fraud revelation compared to the matched control cities.
5% over 5 years? That's even larger than the initial 2.3% figure, and it suggests the effect lasts a while.
Yes, it seems the impact isn't just immediate. The study noted the effect appeared strongest for about 3 years after the news broke, but there was still a measurable difference over 5 years.
So it's not just a quick blip. It's a more sustained negative consequence for the
Well, that's
community.
what this particular analysis points to, yes.
Now, you mentioned earlier that some factors might make this spillover effect worse. What did they find amplified the connection between fraud and crime?
Several things seem to matter. One was media attention.
Okay.
Frauds that got more press coverage showed a stronger link to increased local crime.
That makes intuitive sense. If everyone's hearing about it, maybe it has a bigger psychological impact.
That could be it. More visibility might amplify feelings of strain or cynicism, or just make the event feel more significant locally.
What else?
The size of the stock price drop when the fraud was revealed also mattered. Bigger drops were linked to bigger increases in crime.
Suggesting perhaps a bigger economic shock, more perceived damage.
Plausibly, yes. It might signal more severe underlying problems at the company, maybe greater potential for layoffs or other negative economic consequences for the city.
Did the local job market itself play a role?
It did. The connection was stronger in areas where the job market was shallower. Think smaller cities with fewer major employers.
So if you lose your job in a place with fewer
The
options.
pressure is higher, exactly.
Yeah.
And relatedly, the link was also stronger, specifically when the fraud did lead to high job losses at the firm itself.
Okay, that really reinforces the financial strain mechanism we talked about earlier.
It certainly seems consistent with it. Two other factors stood out as well.
Go on.
Income inequality. Cities with higher levels of income inequality saw a stronger link between fraud revelations and subsequent crime increases.
Why might that be?
Well, perhaps in places with big gaps between rich and poor, seeing executives cheat the system feels even more unfair, more galling. It can intensify that sense of strain or make it easier to rationalize crime.
And the last factor.
Neighborhood wealth, measured by housing prices. The effect was actually more pronounced in cities with lower average housing values.
So hitting less affluent areas harder.
That's what it suggests. Maybe residents in those areas have less of a financial safety net, fewer alternative job prospects, making them more vulnerable to the economic shocks or the psychological effects.
So it really looks like the impact isn't evenly distributed. Communities already facing economic challenges seem to bear the brunt of this added effect.
That appears to be the case, based on these findings.
One other potential explanation for more crime being reported is just more policing, right? Did they look at whether police activity changed after these scandals?
Yes, that's a potential counterargument they addressed directly. They checked if things like the size of the local police force or average sentencing lengths changed significantly after a fraud revelation. They found no significant relationship.
It doesn't seem like cities suddenly beefed up law enforcement or got tougher on sentencing just because a local company got caught cooking the books. So the observed increase in crime probably isn't just because police started arresting more people for things they were already doing.
That's what the analysis suggests. It points towards a genuine increase in criminal activity, not just enforcement.
Okay, that's a really important piece of the puzzle. It closes off a major alternative explanation.
It does. It makes the main finding about the spillover effect more convincing.
So let's try and wrap this up. We've dug pretty deep into this study. What's the single biggest takeaway for you?
For me, it's just how interconnected things are. Actions taken, perhaps secretly, inside a corporate headquarters can have these tangible, negative consequences out on the streets of the city where it operates. It's a societal ripple effect that goes way beyond the boardroom and the stock market.
Yeah, I agree. The key takeaway is that corporate accounting misconduct isn't just a white-collar issue affecting investors. It seems to have real-world, community-level impacts, potentially making neighborhoods less safe by contributing to an increase in everyday financially motivated crime. It's a surprising and frankly disturbing connection.
Absolutely. It challenges us to think more broadly about the costs of corporate crime.
And for you, our listener, hopefully this deep dive gives you a new perspective. The next time you hear about a major accounting scandal, you might think not just about the lost investments, but also about these potential hidden costs to the community itself.
It really does raise some profound questions, doesn't it? If these findings hold true, what does it say about the broader responsibilities corporations have, not just to shareholders, but to the communities where they're physically located?
That's the big thought to leave people with. We focus a lot on the economic benefits. Companies bring jobs, taxes. But what about the potential hidden social costs when things go wrong ethically at the top?
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, if accounting fraud has this effect, what unseen impacts might other types of corporate misconduct be having on society? It highlights just how deeply intertwined the business world and our daily lives really are.
A sobering thought to end on. Thanks for joining us for this, well, eye-opening deep dive.